I think there must be an automated way of muting people. If that's possible, that would be great. I think there's a possibility to do that. So I'm going to, as Maulid Ali online to lead us in the opening prayer. Can somebody help me with that verification? If Maulid Ali is online to lead us in the opening prayer.
Hey, Richard.
Yes.
This is Mary here, and I'm supposed to help you around. I've seen Maulid, but he has left.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. So can anybody else help us with the opening prayer for this session?
Can I do the opening prayer?
Okay, that would be great. Wonderful. Thank you.
Right, Richard, good evening to you. It's John Bosco from Kampala, Uganda. Thank you. Great being here.
All right. I think someone, for some reason, I'm not seeing everybody that has joined, but I think I heard someone say he was going to help us with the opening prayer. Whomever that person was, please do that. Was it Yvonne?
Let me pray for the sake of time.
Okay. All right.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for the session that is ahead of us. We pray, Almighty God, that every speaker that is going to speak to us, help us, Almighty God, that we may master and understand and be able to apply everything that we have learned in our everyday life. Help us, Almighty God, to be change makers in our continent, Africa. We thank you for this grand opportunity.
I think we lost her. So let's quickly summarize the prayer, if there's anything like that, so that we can continue that. So Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you so much for this wonderful gathering. Father, every individual that has joined this gathering, Father, we pray that we are able to take everything that we need to take from this session so that we can be able to be impactful in every space that we find ourselves. In the mighty name of Jesus, we've prayed with thanksgiving, acknowledging every other belief as well. Amen.
Amen.
So, amen. So let's go on to, I was listening to, I wasn't able to join yesterday's session, but I was listening into yesterday's session, and it was an amazing time we all had on here. Even watching was absolutely impactful watching. So at this point, we would like to have some recap of what we've been doing so far for those that were not able to join or were not even able to watch the video after it was released. This will be a good moment for us to reflect and have some recap of what has happened so far. So we're going to have Maureen help us with that recap.
Thank you so much, sir, for this opportunity. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's session. I'll be doing a recap based on what we had yesterday. Okay. Our theme for this conference is Transformative Leadership for Sustainable Development in Africa. Because life never stops teaching, we should never stop learning. I called it yesterday. My respect to the organizers of this conference. Once again, thank you so much, sir. I'm called Maureen Obe, and I'm from Cameroon. My part for this evening is to give a recap about the session we had yesterday. We had young leaders all over Africa who joined us to get knowledge on how we can build Africa, and it was such an exciting one. I'll be very snappy because I'm trying to manage time. Since some of us we are I'm thinking 9 p.m., 10 p.m. So I'll be very snappy. Yesterday's section was coordinated by no other person but Madam Juanita, if I'm correct by the name, who is a communications professional, and she is a mental health advocate. She was the one who piloted yesterday's section. To begin, our first speaker for yesterday's session was no other person but Mr. Edward Asare. He is a digital professional. Yesterday, he started by saying myth about personal branding. He started by talking about the myth about personal branding. And talk about personal branding, he was talking about you building yourself, polishing yourself, because so many of us, we don't know about that. He said that personal branding is a deliberate effort. That is, if you are to brand yourself, you need to do it deliberately. No one was born with it, because he got an example how most of us, we admire celebrities and we're like, they were born with it, so we can't be like them. But he said, no, nobody was born to be like that. So you take your time, you brand yourself, and you do it intentionally. He went further to say that you should be intentional and deliberate in branding yourself. Also, what you think of yourself matters, because as young leaders all over Africa, like, we see ourselves like we are not capable of doing so and so thing. The moment you think of this thing, behold, that's what you will become. So he said, what you think about, it matters. So as young leaders, we should mind what we have in our head, because there's what they call the power of thought, and it works with the universe, from what I grab. A lot of youth end up in the graves without them finding who they are. You need us to understand that young people, end of the grave doesn't mean that you die and you're gone forgotten. There are some of us that what they call living corpses. We have knowledge, but we don't see ourselves that we have those knowledge. We don't make use of them, and we end up being useless in the society, which is not really helpful. And that's why he talked about personal branding. He went further to say, as a young person you should do a SWOT analysis of yourself. Now, what's a SWOT analysis? He break it down. He said, S stands for strength, W stands for weakness, and O stands for opportunity, and T, which is the last, it stands for threat. So as young leaders, we need to use the SWOT analysis to pilot ourselves, to analyze ourselves. If we want to do what we ought to do to build Africa's, we have to use it, because that's what so many great people, so many leaders, they use before they become what they are today. Now, he closed by saying, a closed mouth is not fed. The world is bigger than your WhatsApp. Like, a lot of us, we are limited just on WhatsApp. And that has so much thank God, because they encouraged us yesterday to use the different social media platform, which so many of us, I think we had to go in for it, because so many of us, we end only on WhatsApp. The world is bigger than that. And he concluded by saying, consistency in communication matters. That is, be consistent in communication, so you add your value. Now, our second speaker for yesterday was Honorable Nadia. She is a communicator, a stakeholder specialist.
Thank you so much, Maureen. You're doing it so amazing work. Having listened to yesterday's session, it seems you're really breaking things down for us just the way we need it. And that has really whet our appetite to go back to go watch the previous session if we haven't done that. But unfortunately, as time is running up, we would like to go on to invite our first speaker. All right. So thank you so much, Maureen, for this wonderful recap. So our first speaker is Theo Masango. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. Theo started a career at the First National Bank, South Africa. Theo led the Corporate Social Initiative Fund, focusing on SME support in towns, rural communities. Her passion for empowering young entrepreneurs led her to launch a successful brand and image management company, transforming local talents into international stars. Theo's pursuit of excellence saw her further her education at Vega School of Creative Art, specializing in brand management. She then transitioned into fund advisory and management, handling portfolios for large companies and advising on financial management and investments. By 2019, Theo decided to dedicate herself fully to her business ventures. In 2020, Theo focused on developing young entrepreneurs, participating in numerous incubators and accelerators. Her leadership skills earned her the role of national head for South Africa at Africa's Young Entrepreneurs Organization, AYE, and later regional head overseeing mentorship and empowerment across 16 SADC countries. She co-founded the Entrepreneurs Manager, a platform supporting SME growth and facilitating trade and partnerships across Africa. So I think this is this is more than enough to say about her, and there's just so much that she's doing, and we are so excited and absolutely privileged to have her on this session to throw more light on, leadership in Africa and also when it comes to communication collaboration. So let's welcome Theo on the seat. I mean, if you can snap, you don't have to hear you, but if you can snap, that would be amazing. Welcome, Theo.
Awesome. What a splendid introduction. I am so flattered. Thank you so much. It is my absolute honor and privilege to join you this evening. I believe it is evening in most parts of Africa. And for those who are joining us from the West and globally, good morning, good afternoon to you too. My name is Theo Masango and I hail from South Africa. And as our moderator has already introduced me, I will not go into detail into what I actually do, but I'm sure most of us or most of you and I will then connect on the different social media platforms where I have presence. So yesterday, for those who were on call or for those who were on conference, and as it's already been summarized, we spoke yesterday, our speakers spoke on personal branding, and we also spoke on leadership. And one of the speakers also spoke on how to build the Africa that we want. And my topic today is basically on how we, as young people, as young African leaders, I believe I am joined by African leaders on the platform. And perhaps maybe let me not go too far ahead without acknowledging the leadership of the foundation and to extend my gratitude and to say thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak on your platform and to engage with your network and your audience. I did not take this any light. So thank you very much. So the last speaker spoke yesterday on how we can build the Africa that we want. And my topic today is to talk about how we as young African leaders and how we as the future effective communicators, how we can enhance our verbal and written communication. Since we've already spoken on personal branding, since we've already spoken on leadership, and now we've already spoken on how to build the Africa we want, it's important that we know how we can package that messaging. It's important how we can develop the niche of our leadership, how we can develop our leadership style and be able to communicate it effectively and communicate it succinctly and precisely and crystal clear. So today we're going to talk about how you and I can enhance or develop.
Life is a short. Life is a short. One day is a golden, one day is a bad. One day is for you, one day.
I had to unmute myself there. If everybody, I think the house rules for tonight is as you enter the room, kindly mute yourself so that we do not get any interferences. I understand it's quite late in some parts of the continent, and if we can stick to time and respect the house rules, we'll be able to conclude in time and extract as much value from everyone's presentation for tonight. So if we can just adhere to that. So for the benefit of our talk today and for the benefit of time, I thought it necessary that I do not present from a presentation. I do not share from a presentation. I thought it's important that I go through my presentation and then we can have an engaging and interactive discussion where we then can move. I'll go through my presentation, of course, and then we can move to a question and answer session, and that perhaps can save us some time. However, the presentation that I prepared for the audience tonight will subsequently be shared at the end of the conference or sometime during the week. And I hope that's fine with everyone. So I think we can pretty much agree that communication is a foundation of human interaction, right? I think everyone in the room can agree to that without communication, you and I could not be on this call tonight. So whether we're expressing ideas, building relationships, or navigating challenges, effective communication is essential at every step. And in today's fast-paced world where information is abundant and communication spans are fleeting, the ability to communicate clearly and persuasively has never been more crucial. So throughout this workshop, I'm hoping that we can explore a wide range of topics aimed at sharpening and harnessing your communication toolkit. From understanding the nuances of verbal communication and mastering the art of written expression, we will delve into practical strategies and techniques that you can implement immediately to elevate your communication prowess. So I would have loved that this workshop is hands-on and it's more interactive and we can get into some exercises and role plays. But because of time, we may not be able to do that tonight. However, I'm hoping that we can, in the future, with the foundation, come back and unpack more on how we can enhance and develop our communication strategies. And perhaps in the future, we can have more time and perhaps give it an hour or two and so on. So some of the things that we can look at when we look at the art, and I have coined this, and globally it's coined as such. So we understand that communication is an art. And with art, the more you practice, the more you do, the more you become better. So such as communication, it's important that you keep on doing verbal communication. You keep on speaking, written, you keep on writing, you keep on blogging, you keep on journaling, and the like. Kindly excuse me. Okay, thank you so much. So we're going to look at some of the techniques that we can use to build on our communication, and particularly the art of verbal communication, how you can build on it, how you can master it, and evidently then become an expert as a verbal communicator. Because if you look in the world, some of the people that we admire the most, they are effective communicators because they have mastered rather some of the skills and some of the techniques that I'm going to share with you tonight. So first, it's a need that we understand the importance of verbal communication, where it stems from and what it is, and how we can leverage on it to perhaps build on our brand, to build on the voices or build on the messaging that we want to share with the world, or to build onto the kind or the type of niche we are trying to establish for ourselves. So verbal communication, in essence, is the cornerstone of human connection, as it encompasses the words we speak, the tone we use, and the way we express ourselves. Effective verbal communication is essential in both your personal and professional settings, as it facilitates understanding and it builds relationships and fosters collaboration. Second, we have clear and concise expression. So as you communicate verbally, it's important that you are clear and you're concise, and there is no hidden meaning in your communication. So clarity is paramount in verbal communication. We have to hear what you're saying and not be put in a place where we assume that you are saying what you are saying. So you gotta be that crystal clear. To ensure that your message is understood, we must express ourselves in a clear and concise manner. This involves organizing our thoughts beforehand and using simple language and avoiding unnecessary jargon and ambiguity. We also need to practice active listening. So what does this mean? So if I'm engaging in conversation with you, it's important that I do not think of my next point or my next line in conversation, but I am fully in the conversation and I am quiet even in my mind, not just from my mouth. So my mind is quiet but able to receive what you are sharing. So we gotta so at that point, the person you're in conversation with has got to be the most important person in your mind, and it's got to show on your face that you're interested in this conversation and you're listening actively so that you do not miss the message that's being shared. So communication is a two-way street, and listening is just as important as speaking. Active listening involves fully concentrating on what is being said, understanding the message, and responding appropriately. We also have body language and non-verbal cues. So those are important. So sometimes you'd find that you're talking to someone, but their body language suggests that they're not interested in listening or hearing what you have to say. And in most cases, that dampens the spirit of the person that is talking to you. So while words convey meaning, also body language and non-verbal cues play a significant role in delivering the message that you are sharing with an audience or the second person. Pay attention to your posture, facial expressions, and gestures, as they can either enhance or detract from your message. Maintain eye contact. Very important that you can maintain eye contact as you speak, because that adds to your credibility. That also makes the other person, it gives the other person an opportunity to place their trust on you. So use open gestures and align your body language and your words to your communication effectively. Okay. The fifth point is empathy and emotional intelligence. So I always say that your emotional intelligence, never let your emotions be over your intelligence. So it's always I over E, intelligence over emotions. Your emotions should not dominate your emotional quotient. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. So you've got to be empathetic in your voice, in your tone, and in your body language, and in your mind, in your. Okay, we've been distracted. I hope we'll get it right with time. So pay attention to your posture, facial expressions and gestures, as they can either enhance or detract from your messaging. And practice empathy and emotional intelligence, in that empathy and emotions validate the expressions and experiences of the next person while you respond with compassion. Adaptability and flexibility. Be flexible in your understanding. Be flexible in viewing the world from the next person's point of view or paradigm. So effective communicators like yourselves, as I believe that after this talk, you will decide if you are at a point where you are developing your communication skills. If you are enhancing, or if you're at a point where you are enhancing, even better, you even stand a greater chance to share your insights with us on the call. So I implore that all of us share what we already know on text and we engage as we go. So effective of communicators are adaptable and flexible. They tailor their communication style to suit the situation and the audience, whether it's a formal presentation or just a casual conversation or a negotiation. Being mindful of cultural differences because those do play a significant role in how we can convey our message. We gotta be cognizant of how other people do things. Where communication is concerned, it's never a copy and paste. You gotta learn how people do things and then adapt to how things are done in that particular setting. Okay, so we also gotta practice feedback, practice and feedback. So it's important that you can give, you can receive feedback, and you can give feedback, right? So like any skill, mastering verbal communication requires practice and feedback. Take every opportunity to engage in conversations, presentations, and public speaking. Solicit feedback if it's not given. Solicit feedback from your peers, your mentors, and communication coaches to identify areas of improvement and refine your skills over time. It's also necessary that we continue with our learning. If you're at a point where this is your entry point and you are just learning about communication, particularly verbal, okay, we'll give the person a moment to meet themselves. So if you're at a point where you are learning, it's important that you can source out resources to enhance the skills for yourself. So you can go on platforms such as Udemy, LinkedIn, and Google and enroll for courses that are free and are at your disposal to enhance and build your communication. All right, so now let's look at the art of written communication. So as I said earlier on, communication rather is an art. And the more you do, the more you do well, the more you know, the more you get finer, the more you get sharper, the more you become good at what you do, and eventually you become an expert in that field. So with written communication, this also is a foundation of many aspects of our personal and professional lives as well, as most of us use this in our daily lives on a day-to-day basis or predominantly on a day-to-day basis for most of us. From emails to reports to social media posts to personal letters, the written word really does shape how we convey ideas, build relationships as well, and how we can make an impact. Mastering written communication is essential for today's interconnected world. So with verbal communication, we need to be cognizant of how we punctuate. Our grammar and punctuation is very important. Clarity and conciseness is another. And with grammar and punctuation, these are really the building blocks of effective writing. They provide structure and clarity and coherence to our sentences. Brush up really on those grammar rules such as subject verb, agreement, punctuation usage, and sentencing structure. Pay attention to details as even minor errors can detract from your messaging really. So be careful to not put an exclamation mark where you needed to just put a full stop because that can entirely change the tone of your message and divert from what you initially intended to convey and what you intended to have the message make an impact in the lives of your audience or in the lives of, or even in the life of the person you are just having a conversation with. So your tone and style is another one here. Be aware of the audience that you are writing for. So as effective communicators, know your audience, and before writing, consider that you are addressing what their needs and interests and expectations are. Adapt your messaging and tone accordingly to resonate with your audience and to achieve your communication goals. So structure and organization is important. Editing and proofreading, these are some of the courses you can take on Udemy and LinkedIn. And these are some of the skills you can that can add value on your resume. And these are some of the skills really that you can use to maybe build a side hustle for yourself and just build on your ability to make an income, right? So those are just some of the tools and the skills that you can add to your toolkit as you build your communication, your verbal, and enhance your verbal and written communication. So authenticity and voice. People like to know that they can relate to the speaker or to the communicator. People like to know that you are not a social media person, but you experience similar experiences or you go through similar experiences as they do in their daily lives. So be authentic in how you build rapport through your writing so that your audience can trust you. So you can gain the trust of your audience. Find your unique voice, which is very important. Define your voice, cultivate that voice, and build on it. And let it shine through your writing. Avoid cliches and generic language and rhetoric and hyperbole that's exaggerated. And instead, strive to be genuine, relatable, and engaging. Write from the heart, and your audience will respond in kind. Continual improvement, I cannot emphasize this enough that with every skill, the more you build on it, the more you know better because trends and times and trends particularly, they keep on changing. And if you don't stay abreast of the game, you will be lost. And it definitely is sometimes hard to catch up. So continual improvement is necessary. So writing is a skill that can always be improved. The more you read, the more you write better. So those two go hand in hand. Embrace a growth mindset and commit to continual learning and growth. Seek feedback again from your peers over there. So write and publish those letters, publish those blogs, publish those journals, and let us critique them. We will definitely give you constructive feedback, which you can then use to improve and enhance your skill set. Embrace technology too. So in this, I'm not saying go and let Chat GPT do your work. In this, I'm saying you do the work and then you fact check that work that you've done and the research that you have done with technology tools that are available at your disposal. So in conclusion, really, mastering the art of written communication is essential for success in today's world. By focusing on clarity and grammar, tone, audience awareness, structure, editing, authenticity, and continual learning can improve your art in communication. I just want to share a few takeaway points that I think you can immediately implement in your organizations, in your personal lives, in your professional settings, and in the niches that you are aiming to develop yourself in, and in the spaces that you operate, your spaces of influence that you operate in. And in conclusion, that is clarity is key. Very important that your message is crystal clear, that we know what you stand for, that we know what to associate you with. And that is both in written and verbal communication. You gotta be so clear and we have to know what you are all about. And that is making sure that you can clarify and you can concisely and precisely and succinctly define your offering and your messaging. So also again, active listening matters. This is very important because as you listen, you're taking feedback that you're able to then plow back into your work and enhance your own work, be it written or be it verbal. Adaptability is crucial. So adapt your communication style. If you're writing for Gen Zs, if you're writing for Gen X, write in their language, write in ways that they understand. Of course, also be cognizant that you do not lose your grammatical punctuation there as well. So punctuate right, but write in the most simplest language that your audience can understand. Edit and proofread your work before you hit that send button. Make sure that you have read it at least 4 times. I read my work 4 times before I can send it out. And I'll also share with an associate, say, please go over this and let me know where I have missed it, or correct for me and edit and proofread for me, and then send it back to me. And when they send it back, if I can send it out, I'll read it again. So it's important to edit and proofread your work. So again, when we communicate, we have to make sure for us to be effective communicators and not just communicators because communication is available to be used. We have to make sure that at all times our intelligence is over our emotions. So always I over E. And by this, ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to take your questions. And just remember that the presentation will be shared with you in the week, and we can engage and keep in touch on the different social media platforms. So we can engage on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and on Twitter. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Theo Masango. This was a great session. There's a lot that we have learned and we have taken from this session. And I've noted a lot of questions also down for later for the engagement session in this particular period of the leadership program. All right, so there are a lot of questions. You can always put in your questions in the chat box wherever you are watching this from, either on YouTube or here. We'll make sure to put them down for the engagement session of the program so that we can have a fruitful and full and more wholesome conversation. All right, so without much ado, we are going to take our next speaker, who is in the person of, pardon me if I'm not pronouncing your name right, but it's Ramiz Bakhtiar. And a short introduction about him. He's the founder and director of Peace in Our Schools, a prominent youth activist, peace builder, and refugee based in Canada. As a visionary leader, Ramiz has developed an award-winning program that collaborates with school children and young adults, teaching them peace building and conflict resolution techniques. His efforts promote openness, coexistence, and interfaith friendship across various regions, including Afghanistan, Canada, Georgia, Bosnia, and Indonesia. In 2018, Ramiz made history as Afghanistan's first youth representative to the United Nations, where he had the opportunity to speak at the United Nations Security Council and the UN General Assembly. His extensive involvement in youth leadership programs such as the Frederick Ebert, I'm not too sure of the pronunciation, pardon me, Sung Youth Leaders Forum, One Young World Peace Ambassador, and the Swedish Institute's Leader Lab program. It underscores his commitment to empowering young leaders. Ramiz frequently speaks at conferences and roundtables, emphasizing the importance of youth in decision-making processes and local peace-building efforts. So we are so honored listening to his bio to have Ramiz right here to inspire us as young African leaders. Let us welcome Ramiz. We don't need to hear you, but you can do this to welcome him. Thank you. Ramiz, take the seat.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
We can. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Great. It's so it's so great to be here and see so many bright faces and a lot of people joining this this wonderful conference. Thank you for the introduction. I was born and raised in Afghanistan, as you mentioned, but I currently live in Canada. I came to Canada as a refugee 5 years ago in 2019. I was born in a country that has been affected by war, violence, and of course, a lot of other challenges and miseries that come along with war, which basically inspired me and drove me to work for peace building. When the war started in Ukraine, and then seeing a lot of people suffering from the consequences of more than 4 decades of war in Afghanistan, I've always been thinking about what is that we can do as young people to make a difference, to make a change. So I thought that there was something that we could do, that I can do, and I believe everyone can do. So I started the Peace in Our Schools project. Before going to speak about what are some of the ways that we can contribute to peace building, I would like to share a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm gonna try to share screen. So I started being involved in youth development programs from a very young age, even when I was in Afghanistan. This is a picture of introducing debaters at a debate round at the Canadian Embassy from 2015. So before the Taliban took control of Afghanistan in August 2021, Afghanistan was a democratic country, and young people, men and women, were contributing to building a peaceful society, a peaceful country. So I was working with different NGOs and youth networks, organizing debate programs to improve critical thinking and a culture of debate, tolerance, and acceptance. This is a group of young people debating at the Canadian Embassy. This is a picture from 2012 or 11 when I was debating at the US Embassy, and this is an award that I received from the US Ambassador to Afghanistan back in 2012. In 2018, I was selected as Afghanistan's youth representative to the United Nations. I spoke at the UN Security Council and the UN General Assembly. And of course, I met a lot of young leaders who were UNU delegates of their countries at the United Nations. And there's a collective picture of UNU delegates from these countries with the UN Secretary General, who's still the UN Secretary General. When I spoke at the UN and spent time in New York, met diplomats, and of course met how the United Nations work, I believe that there was a lot that could be done to improve how these global organizations are functioning. and how these global organizations are carrying out their development work. The UNU Delegate Program is a program that is run by countries where they choose UNU delegates from their countries, and then they have the opportunity to represent their youth at the United Nations. They speak at the UN and they learn about the United Nations. Many countries still do not have a UNU delegate program. So after I attended, after I served my my term as a UNU delegate of Afghanistan, I've been actively advocating together with my colleagues for the expansion of the UNU delegate program. So we've been talking to diplomats, to UN ambassadors, to youth networks, to launch the UNU delegate program in their countries. So if your country does not have a UNU delegate program, which I think many countries in the African continent does not have a UNU delegate program, it's definitely something that you can advocate for and look into. It's a wonderful opportunity. And most importantly, the youth of your country will have a voice at the very top level to advocate for change and for their inclusion. When I was in New York for the UN General Assembly back in 2018, I met a lot of high-level diplomats, including the US ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, who was later this year running for US presidency. There are also different pictures from different programs that I've been speaking at during my term as a U delegate and after that. The picture at the left corner is something that we did through Peace in Our Schools. Peace in Our Schools is a project that we go to different countries and we organize workshops on peace building, conflict resolution, and emotional intelligence. And we primarily do this work with school students and as well as young adults who are university students. This picture is from my colleague that I joined online with a group of students in Indonesia. So we have done the project in Bosnia, in Georgia, and in Indonesia. And there's a picture with the students in Indonesia. Again, just a picture from Afghanistan from 2014. This is when I was competing for the Afghan youth representative to the UN role. This was the final round of the competition, where the 3 finalists were asked to deliver a presentation on the importance of ceasefire to bring the long-lasting peace. Of course, the ceasefire is important, but unfortunately, the efforts to bring peace in Afghanistan did not lead to a lasting peace. It did end the armed conflict, but it has not brought peace to Afghanistan, because peace means more than just the absence of violence and war. When I was at the UN, I was invited by the former Afghan government's embassy in DC to meet with our diplomats and friends of Afghanistan. Unfortunately, the Afghan embassy in Washington was closed after the Taliban took over Afghanistan, because no country has recognized the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan. So the United States decided to close the Afghan embassy in DC. This is a picture delivering a speech at the UN Security Council. The UN Security Council has rarely given a chance to a UN delegate to brief the Security Council. In November, sorry if the pictures are not in an order in terms of time. In November last year, I traveled to Georgia, the country, And we organized the Peace for All Summit with a group of Georgian youth and as well as a group of Ukrainian youth who fled Ukraine after the Russian invasion to Georgia. There are a number of Ukrainian youth now in Georgia who left the country because of the war. Back to Bosnia, where we organized a workshop with the school students. This is a secondary school in Sarajevo in Bosnia, and we organized a workshop on peace building, conflict resolution, and emotional intelligence. In January this year, I traveled to Switzerland, where I was invited to speak at the Basel Peace Forum. Last year in 2023, Peace in Our Schools won an award from the Basel Peace Office. It's called the PACE Award. It's a prestigious global award given to youth-led peace-building organizations. So we used the award, which was not just an award, but came with a small grant that enabled us to do the work that we did in Georgia. And then they also invited me to speak at the Basel Peace Forum. You mentioned during the introduction that I'm also a One Young World ambassador, peace ambassador. I joined One Young World as a delegate, as a peace ambassador back in 2021. I was given a scholarship to attend the One Young World Summit in Munich in Germany. Since 2021, I've been involved with One Young World. It's a global organization that is based in the UK, and it has several wonderful programs for young people in different fields. They also organize annual summit every year, I believe since 2010, where they bring more than 1,000 young people from all around the world for a 3-day summit to discuss everything that is important for young people. This picture is not from 2021. It's from 2023, when I was again invited as a returning ambassador or delegate to the One Young World Summit in Northern Ireland. And there I had the opportunity to meet this group of very inspiring young leaders from South Africa. Another picture from the second round of Peace in Our Schools workshops with a group of students in Bosnia. This, I believe, is a picture from One Young World Summit in Munich. One Young World is a great platform. I encourage everyone in this meeting to look One Young World's website and try to stay in touch with One Young World. They provide scholarships every year to young people who can apply from around the world to participate at the One Young World Summit. The One Young World 2024 Summit is coming to Canada, Montreal, and I will be more than happy to share information or assist anyone interested throughout their application, but all the information is on the One Young World website. This is also a session with students in Georgia. Through Peace in Our Schools, we have so far worked with 10 schools and directly bringing more than 1,000 students to workshops. During our workshops, one thing that we teach the participants is the importance of positive peace and negative peace. I mentioned briefly earlier that peace is not just the absence of direct violence or armed conflict. Peace is more than that, and people define peace based on their own perspectives. So, for example, for girls in Afghanistan, peace means they're having the ability to go to school, to be able to choose for their future what they want to choose, to be able to work, and not to be subject with draconian laws. So peace has a different meaning in purpose for people according to their own experiences and according to their own thoughts and perceptions. So that's important because there is no single definition for peace. And when there's no armed conflict in a country, it means that it's a negative peace. There is no war, but if there are a lot of other restrictions and challenges, if people don't have the freedom to speak their minds, or if they're not allowed to, for example, go to school or choose a career that they like for themselves, then it's a negative piece. We also teach the participants in our Peace in Our Schools workshops the importance of using dialogue as a tool. We need to remember that our world is facing complex problems, and politicians usually go for easy solutions to address complicated problems. But today's world challenges cannot be addressed with easy solutions. For example, we have seen that usually when politicians and diplomats at the top level want to resolve a conflict, they try to do it through agreements between politicians. But agreements at the top level and at the political level have not led to sustainable peace. That's why in the past 2 decades, more than 900 peace agreements have been signed, but the world has become less peaceful. So peace is not at the top level, it's at the bottom level. That's why dialogue at the bottom level and at the middle out is extremely important to bring a sustainable peace in an armed conflict. Dialogue can lead to peace when there is a purpose. Usually we engage in a dialogue in a smaller group, which can be a group of 2 or slightly bigger, or in the context of a country. But dialogue works when it has a purpose. And the purpose of a dialogue should be to reach a common ground. If the purpose of a dialogue is who is going to win the argument and who is going to lose the argument, then the dialogue will not lead to peace. If the purpose of the dialogue is that, okay, we're having this dialogue about this complicated issue, which has the potential to lead to a conflict, but the purpose of the dialogue is to reach a common ground where there is no loser or winner, then the chances that the dialogue will succeed are high. I will end my presentation with this picture, which is from, so the picture of the little girl at the right is from 1972 in Vietnam. The little girl is Kim Phuc, or known as the Napalm girl, who was burned after a bomb was dropped on her village. And she's running here with a bunch of other kids escaping from the bomb scene. And the fire as a result of the bomb had burned her clothes. She was then taken by the photographer to the hospital. She survived with severe injuries. And a couple of years ago, one day I was reading an article about her, which I encourage you all to read her story. Her story is very inspiring and amazing. I found out that she was now living in Canada. The picture at the left is the same Nepal girl who now lives in Canada. She has established the foundation, Kim Foundation, and she's advocating for safety and protection and well-being of children who have been affected by war. That's all about what we do in the presentation. Of course, it's going to be a very long discussion if we go to details of what strategies are best for peace building, or how to build a strategy for conflict resolution. But one way or a single strategy to end an armed conflict will not apply to all contexts, because it's a very complicated problem. So every context requires its own way of dealing with it. But I will end with this, that conflict is not negative by nature. Conflict is not destructive by nature. So we always need to make a distinction between conflict and violence. Violence is destructive by nature. It's negative by nature, and it's never good. Conflict is not negative. If dealt with in a constructive way, conflict can be very productive. So, and conflict will always be there. It's a part of human nature. We can't avoid it, we can't deny it, and we can't remove conflict from our lives. But what makes conflict either positive or negative is how we as individuals deal with it. It can be in a family level, it can be in a small group of our friends or partners, or in a work environment. And then if we look at the bigger context, if our leaders in today's world had this ability how to address their conflicts in a peaceful way, we wouldn't have war in Ukraine, we wouldn't have war in Gaza, we wouldn't have war in Afghanistan, we wouldn't have war in Sudan, or in Somalia, so many other countries. It's lack of the capacity within the leadership at the top level, how to address conflicts, which leads to war and violence. Thank you.
You're kindly reminded to mute yourself whilst you're a part of this session that's going on, because when you don't, it disrupts the whole thing. Please do mute yourself. And thank you so much, Rameez, for this insightful session. We are taking note of all the things you're saying, and I'm also taking note of all the questions that are coming in. We are saving all of that to the engagement segment of this whole session, so that we'll be able to engage more fluidly and in a way that we'll be getting a wholesome response and discussion from all of us. All right, so without wasting much time, we want to invite Jessica Mshama. Jessica Mshama is the founder of the Azamta Digital Schools and the NGO Nakwa na Taifa Langu. Jessica is dedicated to empowering women and youth through digital skills, job opportunities, and financial education. Recognized as one of Forbes 30 Under 30 Africa, she continues to inspire positive change in her community and country. Jessica's mission is deeply personal, rooted in her experiences growing up in Tanzania, where she witnessed gender disparities and a lack of opportunities. These experiences fueled her dedication to activism and creating impactful change. Despite facing challenges from traditional mindsets and societal norms, Jessica's determination remains unwavering. Sorry, am I still connected? I'm seeing some notifications. I think I'm still connected.
Yes, you are.
All right, thank you so much. So if Jessica is here with us, she can absolutely take the seat at this moment.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica. Thank you for the brief introduction. Thank you so much for the previous speakers. Oh, what an amazing platform to share with incredible people. Basically, what I'm going to share with you guys is the importance of building strong alliances for sustainable development, which is very crucial for African youth in several reasons. First, to begin with, I believe in the power of coming together as young people, bringing solutions, creating solutions for our community based on our experiences, but also shaping the future that we have as young Africans. The most important thing that I want to discuss is the importance of alliances between different organizations that promote cooperation in the African continent for sustainable development. One of the important things is reason being for resource mobilization. As we know, as a matter of fact, we have so many resources in African continent. Our continent is very wealthy. Our continent has got a lot of opportunities, but yet we cease to utilize all the opportunities. But coming up together, it will promote resource mobilization. Example on the African Youth Initiative for Climate Change, AYICC, brings together young people from across the continent and pool resources and share strategies in addressing climate change. This collective efforts enables us to secure so many opportunities such as fundings and support for various environmental projects. Coming to the topic of climate change, I understand that most of African countries are not really main contributors of climate crisis, but however, that doesn't leave us behind from tackling climate or environmental crisis happening in our communities. We should maintain the standards and moreover promote sustainability of climate conservations and practices that is important. So if more of the youth that are coming here on this platform, they want to know about the opportunities on how to tackle this challenge, you can simply Google what African Youth Initiative for Climate Change has been doing and just dive deep into that conversation. And also another point that I would like to also highlight about the importance of creating alliances is developing or encouraging new knowledge and skills sharing. We have many institutions, and that's what inspired me actually. The reason why I'm promoting quality education in Africa, because I believe that there is a gap of lack of information to the people that are within our communities that can develop different strategies coming up with solutions for their community. So African Leadership Academy, ALA, also fosters a network of young leaders who share their knowledge and skills through different workshops, conferences, online platforms, which supports a younger generation to have the key understanding and the importance of information and sharing knowledge. And I will add up with the personal story that I stand with. When it was 2020, when the breakout of COVID happened, I realized that there is a gap of the use of digital skills and digital platform in sharing information in such a way where the Western world or the more developed country, they were still practicing going to school and having their schedules because they had access for online platforms. They had access of online education systems that majority of African country were facing lockdowns, and some of them even had to redo their current year at schools and take some extra classes after the COVID pandemic. So through that, it made me realize that it's time for us to develop the digital platforms in sharing education and knowledge. As they say, the future is on the tip of our hands, and that is very correct, because when you talk about digital economy, you also have to talk about digital education, because who are these people who are going to utilize the digital economy if the same knowledge is not reaching to the roots or to the people that really need to understand what it means digital economy. through that understanding and insights, I developed a school together with my mother, of course. My mother had 20 years experience of running schools, but simply I was getting into the business of running schools. So this is like my 4th year. And I run the school in a different way where we are promoting digitalization, we're promoting technology, we're promoting STEM courses, and now we're even promoting space education. And space education is the future. Majority of African country, again, our countries are not utilizing the resources of space technologies, which now the developing countries are investing a lot of money in research and coming up with solution through the space, knowledge. So we're also doing that in our school together with our organization. We're promoting that so that we cannot leave people behind. I was recently speaking to my mentor last week, and she told me, you are the generation that are not going to be thinking of building new modes of BMW, but rather than building rockets, rather than building satellites, rather than building technologies that are transforming the world right now. So in that way, it's very important to address the digitalization and technology and information for a better future. Again, the importance of strong alliances is for innovation and creativity, just as what I've just mentioned, but also it amplifies voices. And speaking about amplification of voices, I would like to highlight that I've been an influencer of European Union External Action Services, EEAS, in Brussels, where we came together two years back and created a program, a movement called Our Voice, Our Future, where youth all over the world joined us to create stories that they would like leaders and change makers of this generations to hear them out and make differences in their community. So we talked about climate issues, we talked about economic empowerment, we talked about financial education, we talk about digitalization, technology, and all important things that we think it's benefit for. Well, yeah, which is benefit for our future. So our campaign reached to a number of 60 million people. It was very successful, and last year we talked about it during the General Assembly. In 2022, again, I was the youth delegate from Tanzania that presented the campaign in front of more than 16 presidents. So in that way, we can see how much if we collaborate rather than, standing alone, shows a very great impact and can make a serious difference in the community. Another thing I would like to also highlight is resilience building. The African Youth Resilience Network, I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but it supports young people in building resilience against social, economic, and environmental challenges. Through partnership, they provide resources, they provide support system that can help communities stand and recover from adversities. So resiliency comes when we collaborate. Resiliency doesn't just build when we all work alone, but rather than if we decide as a country, young leaders, to come up together, just as this platform is giving us, let us have an end result impact. What is our conclusion after this? How are we building the momentum of change? How are we supporting one another to form different collaboration, to form different association that can pull a demand in the community of change? So all this comes together when we all are in unity. The last and least is the economic opportunities. day before yesterday, you can all, if you want, you can all follow me on my Instagram. I'm known as Jessica Mshama, JESSICAMSHAMA. And I talked about the power of economic opportunity lies on the ability of the knowledge and education from single individuals in the community. You cannot create demand in a community where does not really understand the importance of education. Economic opportunities cannot happen if we still are not investing in the right education that creates demand and provides solution of the world market today. We eventually, 3 years back, they launched AFCFTA movement, African Free Continental Trade Agreement. I expected to see majority of young leaders in entrepreneurship coming up with more collaborative companies. Like now that the taxes have been lowered to transport goods, or now that the laws and regulations have been standardized to promote AFCFTA, I believe we're yet to see youth that are coming together in creating economic opportunities. There is nothing more strong than having strong communities with their economic strength. You'll never be a puppet when you have your economic stability, when you have your economic say. But then we are compromised in certain ways of taking things very less than what we are supposed to be taking in as countries, as leaders, because of our economic status. So I'm yet to see the power of African youth in creating economic opportunities. I'm yet to see how African continents and young leaders coming from East Africa, West Africa, having companies that employs more than 2,000 people, forming IT solution companies that creates a job opportunity. Let's move from self-wealth making rather than community wealth making. Rather than continental wealth making. That in that way we'll build strong alliances and bring prosperity to our continent. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Jessica. This was an absolutely enlightening session. And I would say that for a lot of people in the chat, they want to connect with all the speakers that are speaking so far. So if there's a LinkedIn link that you'd like to share, there's an Instagram link you'd like to share with us for us to be able to connect, it would be amazing, because I can see that eagerness for every speaker that speaks here, that we want to connect with you, want to know more about you, we want to be able to grow together. And that was a very good point that you made on collaboration. So without wasting much time, so that we get enough time for our engagement session, you can always put your questions and your contributions also in the chat for the engagement session. I want to quickly go to our next speaker, who's in the person of Isaac Abua. He is the co-founder and CEO of Mello Technologies, where AI is transforming sales and inventory management for mid-sized manufacturers and distributors. Before Mello, Isaac's entrepreneurial journey began with a humble popcorn and smoothie stand at the University of Ghana, and has since grown to include Founding Curve and Uber for public transport. Isaac's passion for entrepreneurship is evident in his work with Junior Achievement Ghana, where he redesigned and digitized an entrepreneurship curriculum for over 1,000 high school students annually. As a program manager and consultant, he has also trained thousands of young entrepreneurs through initiatives like Developers in Vogue, the National Entrepreneurship and Innovation Program, NEIP, and the entrepreneurial community he founded, Ghana for Startups. Isaac is an advocate for sustainability, serving on the boards of the Commonwealth Human Ecology Council and the Global Climate Story Network. He also hosts the Change Africa podcast, a leading thought leadership platform, and writes for the Business and Financial Times, sharing insights into tech, business, and climate action in Africa. Without wasting much time, because we want a lot of time to discuss, let us welcome Isaac.
Hello, am I visible enough?
Yes, you are, and we can
Okay.
hear you clearly. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here. Wherever you are calling in from, it's a great privilege to have an exciting platform like this to share my perspectives on key issues on the continent. So my topic today is changing the African narrative. And I've been reflecting on that for some time now. And I've been trying to think about what is the best way to, approach this topic. So in that reflection, I thought of two paradigms. First is the idea of changing Africa's narrative versus changing the African narrative, and what conflicts are between them, and how that can change our perception of this conversation when it comes to what is really thought about Africa in the continental stage. So stay with me when I try to resolve these two paradigms. First is that when we talk about changing Africa's narrative, we're talking about a perspective where we're zooming out and we're looking from the outside. What is the global perception of Africa? How do people globally see Africa? And then when we talk about changing the African narrative, we're putting ourselves in the agency of how do we as Africans reimagine our stories and take agency in how we tell our stories and how we define how we look at within and without of Africa. And so with that being said, I would like to then remold this conversation from just changing the African narrative to changing Africa's narrative to change the African narrative, which is by saying that if we look within and we see how we can reprioritize the way we be able to succeed and how we conceptualize our storytelling so that the world looks at it in a different approach. So that's what now the story is going to be. The title of my story, my talk today would then be changing Africa's narrative to change the African narrative. Okay, so welcome to that talk. If you imagine what has been portrayed of Africa, it goes like a 15-year-old who lives in, say, the northern part of, say, the northern of Ghana, wakes up 6 a.m. in the morning, travels for 2 hours to go and carry firewood, come back to the house, travel for another 3 hours to get potable water to drink. And that scenery defines what Africa is portrayal in the global media space looks like. It is a place of distraction, it's a place of agony, it's a place of difficulty. And that is what has been told about Africa for a very long time. And this narrative did not come by mistake, right? Because narratives as the mindset, narratives as an interpretation of the stories that we keep hearing about ourselves, they have a history. There is a long history of Africa being the continent that was colonized. There's a long history about Africa being the marginalized continent. There's a long history about Africa being the continent that has not reached out to the global scales of economic success. And that has obviously incentivized an idea, a thought process that has influenced the way that we view Africa. And so I would like us to take a very thought-driven process in how we see that narrative being formed. So we can come to an agreement that before any narrative is formed, which is basically before we conceptualize how we're going to have a viewpoint and how we're going to have a perspective on anything that is in the world, it starts from usually an initial exposure. So exposure from reading, exposure from observation, and then as those things are exposed to us, we become selectively attentive to some of those parts that are striking. So it could be a picture that is striking, it could be an emotional message, and that is how we start to build information, right? So we start to build information from gathering these emotive images. We start to build information by gathering text, etc. So by participating in the world aloud, we start seeing different perspectives that influences how we frame our narratives. Now, we start to process and interpret this narrative. So we go into the process of cognitive framing. We hear things about the world, and then we start to interpret it with existing knowledge and framework of how we see the world. So if we see a portrayal of someone, for example, who is not wearing a particular clothing, we interpret that as likely to be dangerous, as likely to be from a poor background. These are knowledge systems and frameworks that exist in the world that are cognitive framing then helps us to be able to process, and then we have an emotional reaction to it. So by having an emotional reaction to it, we either like, dislike, become angry, become happy, start to laugh, etc. And then these things, these memories, these emotive reactions that we're having, how we process it, then becomes part of our framework of storage of information. So we keep these things, especially when they exhibit an emotional reaction. We keep them in our memory bank, and then we come to the stage where eventually this information that was processed, that gave us emotional reaction, that was stored, gets to be associated with things that we do. They are associated with how we interpret the world. They are associated with how we reinforce or challenge existing narratives and stories that we are told. And then we come to the final stage of synthesis. So we come to the final stage of synthesis. And synthesis is that when we take all of these individual data points and we process them together, we start to make conclusions. And we start to connect the dots. And we start to sequence the events. And we start to
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So let's go back to that process. We can see that for a long time, most Africans, when they grew up, have been oriented to a way of life where they are the marginalized continent. They are the colonized continent. Even the way that we've been colonized, the media that we watch, the global publicity of CNN, BBC, talking about the dead continent, etc., informs us about how we start seeing ourselves. We put that into, we frame it in our minds, we start having emotional reactions to it, an emotional reaction and a development of inferiority that then builds up a memory bank that we start synthesizing about ourselves. And so when we go to some spaces in particular, for example, we start accepting that inferiority as part of who we are, unfortunately. And that becomes part of the narrative that we build. The narrative that we build internally, but the narrative that we also build across. So we allow those things that we have heard outside then define how we feel within, which is not how it's supposed to be. My argument today is that we need to start building what I would argue is propaganda frameworks that instill a certain mindset and framework and story within us. Everybody has watched the popular American film where there is a hero, and that hero is going to save the American flag. That hero is saving the world. That hero is killing the villains. That those stories that we're told about the Americas, about Europe, etc., then defines how we buy into a certain American dream, for example, and we want to be part of that. The media has great potential in influencing how we view the world. And some of these media you would argue, be propaganda campaigns, because if you lived in, for example, New York, you would see that there are squatters in New York too, that there are dirty places in New York too. But you would find it very difficult to find those representations in popular exhibitions of what New York looks like. New York would look like, Broadway. New York would look like the United Nations headquarters. All of these places, the Empire State Building, that rings a bell within us and popularizes narrative that we've been told. So on the African continent, what we can start to do to reshape first the African narrative is by doing the work of Africa's narrative that we have within ourselves. And that starts from theming what is Africa and what is then obviously what is a particular country like, and what role do we want to play? How do we want the outside world to see us? And so that really means that we define what our media goes out. We define what is the brand recognition that we want to have as Africa. What is the brand recognition that we want to have as Ghana? And that obviously means that the country as a whole has to buy into a certain story that we tell ourselves. A story that is obviously backed by actions. So the actions obviously are the development that we want to see, etc. Those things cannot be split apart. We cannot, in one vein, saying that we are a great continent, for example, while in the other vein, perpetrating acts that allows us to even doubt ourselves of that greatness that, for example, we might be perpetrating. And so we need to build the systems that correlate with our actions, and we need to let that go viral. We need to use social media. We need to support local media. We need to build campaigns that enable us to be able to push those narratives across the world. One of those successful campaigns is, for example, Ghana creating what we call the Year of Return. The Year of Return was supposed to be a campaign that reignited the global diaspora back into Africa as a place where they can reconnect with the ancestry. And that worked very well by pitching Ghana, particularly in Africa as a whole, as a place of recognizance with identity, especially for Black Americans and Black people in the global diaspora that have felt like they've lost part of the identity in different countries that have become their home. To come back to their home and to reclaim their identity. When you create a global identity, when you create a campaign like that, when you put global influential figures on that, what you start to do is you start to enable a certain reframing of mindset about what Africa is. Now, Africa is not the place where people come once a year, but Africa now becomes a home for a global diaspora community who can now visit, who can now come here and say, this is our home, and become a part of it. And they take our stories, they take our culture back to where they come from, and that starts to reshape how we think about the continent from the outside, because those stories that are being told are now going to be popularized globally. Another thing that we can do definitely is when the Arab world, for example, saw how the portrayal of the Arab world was hurting them, they created Al Jazeera. The global media landscape is a perspective defining mechanism. So it shapes the way we interpret the world around us by writing stories that define our perspectives. And those perspectives will come by mass distribution mechanisms. Mass distribution like mechanisms like big platforms like BBC and CNN. So when we look outside of Africa, we see CNN, and then we say CNN is portraying Africa badly. We say BBC is portraying Africa badly. If we can create our own media mechanisms, say the equivalent of an Al Jazeera that is committed to portraying the best and the best only of Africa's development of African imageries, we start to reclaim that. It is only when we build our own digital and mass media platforms that enable us to be able to tell our own stories and own the narrative and own the foundations with which we become a people, with which we define our identities. That is the only way that we can start to reclaim these things. And this starts from penetrating through our educational curriculum and challenging colonized curriculums and challenging how we view our perceptions about ourselves from the child who grows up defining themselves as African and accepting the African heritage as not a minimizing heritage, but an empowering heritage. Collaborating with content creators, because the new media economy has changed the way we envisage the world. For example, there's a whole landscape of now social media influencers who are changing the way that we see our world. And I'm going to give you an example shortly. And that is transforming different facets of, for example, dance and music. One of the key reasons why Afrobeats has taken over is because new media has enabled new distribution outlets and has taken media all over the world. Just take a look at dance, for example. Young teenagers, people in their 20s becoming global influencers because of dance, and that they are creating a dance that millions, and I mean millions of people learn within seconds and becomes global dance routines. If we can penetrate these dance routines with, again, imagery, lobbying, propaganda messaging, and I use the word propaganda because it is used in a bad light most of the time, but that is what media is all about. Media is about telling a certain narrative that fits your ideal of what the world should look like. And we should obviously balance that with the reality of how the world looks like. But the reality of what the world looks like is the perception we create. So let's create a perception based on the ideal we want to see. My podcast, for example, doesn't shy away from tackling Change Africa podcast, and please subscribe and listen to some of the conversation we had with some of the best thought leaders on the continent. We don't shy away from what is wrong with Africa, but we make sure that while we are discussing Africa's woes, we also bring people who have created solutions to those problems, who have spent decades to think about those problems, and then we bring depth into the nuance of those issues that other media organizations globally might not be getting the opportunity to do. So we should invest in that storytelling where we push our thought leadership, we put our figureheads, we create content that reimagines what Africa's heritage is and reclaims what Africa's heritage is, and allow us to be at the forefront of what being an African is. And that should dissipate from our schools. If I speak to a 6-year-old, I should be able to tell this person embraces the African heritage. This person embraces who the African identity is. And that starts to enable us to reclaim those spaces. Because when we start reclaiming those spaces that have been taken by the global West, that have been taken by popular media platforms, then we start to define our own trajectory. Because most of our realization of what African is in the global West, for example, and how that portrayal has been done, it's been done by people who rarely know about Africa. And they tell us what Africa is and we accept it. So for example, we know of the Wakanda movie, what is it called? Black Panther. Black Panther was created, unfortunately, by white people. The production of Black Panther was white, even though the actors and the lead characters were Black people, right? The narratives under it are not truly African, for example. And there's nothing wrong with that, even though there was a global campaign that celebrates that. Every time there was a woman, like the woman king, for example, you see that there are white writers that are behind it. But you see, we need people that change that. And when we have to wait for Hollywood to bring their white writers to influence our media landscape, then we'll always wait to do the work of coming to correct what has already been done, the damage that's already been done. So we need to be investing in movies that are telling people all over the world that this is the African heritage. And obviously, this is media that we have to own, media that we have to write, media that has to be based on our ancestry and our history. And this is what we are not seeing. We sit down and we say, we wait for some group of people to say Africa is right, and then we go with that. We wait for some people to say, oh, Afrobeat is the new thing, and we go with that. We need to be intentional about creating a narrative that says, if we are all promulgating this narrative of Afrobeat, then we're doing that. And we don't do that with a lot of intentionality. For example, you see artists fighting among themselves, claiming different tags. But if you only want to do this, we have to have a single story. Obviously, not a single story, for example, not to conflate that with, say, Chimamanda's single story, where we see Africa as one thing. No, but we have to have a single narrative of this is Africa. And in that single narrative, there can be different perspectives. There can be different nuances. But the single narrative, if the single narrative is that Africa's tech economy is booming and we are pushing that agenda, there has to be that integration across different African countries working together to build that African brand. And you can see that Rwanda has done that very well. When you go to Rwanda, and I've been there a couple of times, it's not a perfect country, but you can see that if you go there, there is a deliberate attempt for people who come into the country to want to report Rwanda in a certain way and to give a certain light of Rwanda. And you can argue about the pros and the cons of that. But the truth is that whether we like it or not, everywhere in the world, that is what is done. The Chinese government is always defending its what you would argue as anti-democratic, regime, but it is invested into making sure that a certain narrative is being told about China. The US government is invested in telling a certain narrative about the US that we buy. So even though we may have our problems, we need to be investing in certain narratives that we need to be pushing on the world to buy so that we ourselves start to believe that. And obviously, we cannot do that by lying to ourselves. We need to invest in infrastructure. We need to make sure that our governments are doing as they say, but that has to be in tandem with a global storytelling engine that is intentional, that is purposeful, that is going to the root of making sure that we prioritize what Africa is, what our countries are. And by prioritizing those narratives, we start to build frameworks and systems that empower local voices, that gives us our platform, to mainstream our media, to mainstream our women, to bring the nitty-gritties of our rural communities that may be looked at in the wrong light by the global West. Our ethnic minorities that have their own distinct culture, their own distinct practices, that have a lot of heritage and cultural relevance in it, to popularize that. And that is the way where we can start to making sure that we can reclaim our narrative, we can change and shift the perceptions, and we can become a dominant force within the global narrative. We can become a dominant force within the global narrative. Like I said in the beginning, it starts from initial exposure. We need to be exposing the world to African culture, to African movies, and we need to be doing that with intentionality, with a viral theme. We need to be doing that with an agenda that says, this is the Africa we want to portray. And in our countries, we need to be singing the same tune. We need to be telling our people that this is Africa, and that this is Africa is an image of patriotism, it's an image of resilience, it's an image that celebrates our cultural heritage, and that image should be pushed virally. We need to be writing about our culture, and that is why I created a podcast, for example, to make sure that I'm doing my part. If you're an African, wherever you see yourself, because of the very particular frameworks, the very particular narratives that have been created that affect you.
Sorry to interrupt, but we have just about 2 minutes to run through. Okay. All right.
Yeah, those particular narratives that affect you, you need to take that space and you need to make sure that your representation in those spaces, not that you need to, you need to be the ultimate representation of some African excellence, because you are an individual and your excellence is defined by whatever you choose to do. But you need to own the space by owning your African heritage, and you owe it to all of us by representing us, by telling our stories, and by creating a dominance in our narrative that says that we know what we are and we are not going to allow people to tell it. And that is the only way that we can change the African narrative. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Isaac. We know who we are and we won't allow other people to tell it. That's a very good way to ending this particular segment. Yeah, so there are a lot of questions, but because we have some limited time to address these questions, what we are going to agree on is I'm going to take one question each for one speaker, and we see how much more time that can be allowed. If not, we're just going to end. But yes, the very first question that came through had a lot to do with eye contact. Okay. And when it comes to communication, understandably so, because with Africa, we have a lot of cultural things around eye contact, which does not translate well with the rest of the world when it comes to believability, trust, and so on. And this is directed towards Theo Masango. There were questions around eye contact and what the difference is between gazing and looking. You know, other people were also asking, do they have to look them in the eye? Do they have to look at them on their forehead or certain other corners? How is the eye contact supposed to happen? So if Theo Masango is with us, can you please address this question?
Okay, I'm back on. Thank you so much for the question. So in my experience, I find that when you maintain eye contact, as difficult as it normally is to engage, or it can be to engage with people and maintain eye contact, I find that you become more relatable and people can trust you, and you become, it actually enhances your credibility because if you cannot maintain eye contact, it easily informs, I don't know if it's on my side, it easily informs the next person that perhaps you are unsure of what you're speaking about, or you are not to be trusted. So it can diminish your credibility a bit. So what I think we can use as a skill, or we can add to our toolkit, as we spoke about adding tools to our toolkit to enhance our verbal and written communication, where it comes to eye contact, remember this, and this is a hack that works for me as well. What I know is that if you are generally a person who may be a bit nervous on taking up podiums or taking to the stage or public speaking, the only person who really knows that you're nervous is you and not your audience or the next person. So unless you show it in your voice or in your conduct or your stature, they don't know. And if you can control that within you, and remember that the only person who knows is you, and the other person will only know if you alert them. And if you don't, they wouldn't know. So those are some of the things that you can use to just remember that the next person does not know what you're going through, your emotions, and they will only know unless you are vocal about them through your nonverbal cues or your tone or how you deliver your speech. Another thing you can do is, when I was in high school and we did debating and public speaking, I think my coach then would say, just imagine that everyone in the room is some form of a cartoon character, or imagine that they made examples that are not so, I really don't want to use on this platform, but one thing that stood for me was that imagine that everyone in the room is some cartoon character, and that should ease how you then relate to them. You can look above their heads and not directly in their faces. So when I'm looking above somewhere, above my audience's heads, it doesn't really tell them that I'm looking at them. It can easily tell them that I'm looking at something behind them. So you can still maintain eye contact in that way. So I hope that answers your question. When it comes to looking, I think there was another question about looking or gazing. I think gazing is more about dreamlike, dreamland. You are gazing and you're thinking about other things that could be emotional and so on. But looking is what we do on a daily. I'm looking at my screen now and I'm not gazing at
All can put our forces together in order to make.
Okay, so I think that's the difference. I also noted another question, just in the interest of time. So I'm going to answer the questions that I saw. So you can then obviously advise if I've missed anything else. So with regards to shyness as well, you can start with social activities like engaging with people in your circle, having conversations with them, and engaging more deliberately with them, with the people within your circle. And that can help you build your confidence in how you carry yourself and how you can overcome being shy at all if you are perhaps a shy person. So you can start by engaging people in your community. It could be a church, it could be in the community that you live in, it could be your friends. So expose yourself and challenge yourself to put yourself in situations and environments that will cause you to interact. Go for those networking events. Do not rush out after church and not engage with the congregation. Engage with the people around you. And by so doing, you'll realize that, oh, actually, perhaps I wasn't shy. Maybe I just didn't have the opportunity to express myself. And as you do that, you then harness and can build on your skills. And over time, I believe that you'll be able to be able to build your confidence and can eventually win off shyness. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. This was very well explained and, answered. One thing that I heard you repeat over and over again is being able to practice over and over again, and then you'll get better. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge Andrew Chin. He is from Jamaica, and he's a legal professional with about 5 years experience in talent acquisition and also a fellow of Gavi Nkrumah Fellowship Program. Welcome, Andrew Chin. We are absolutely honored to have you with us. And going quickly into the next question, I'm going to adopt a strategy to be able to put as many questions together as possible. So this is to Mr. Ramiz, and the question says, they are quite intrigued about your story. There were a lot of questions, and they want to know how your journey started and how was that journey for you, and how were you able to achieve that work, sharing your work in peace building with, the UN and these great people that you encountered. Are there some tips that you can share with us considering your journey up to that point? Mr. Ramiz, if you're here, can help us with that question. Okay, so I was just notified that he's not on call right now, but let's go quickly to Jessica. A question came through that says that since we are far behind in technology as Africans and digitalization, what do you think as youth leaders we can do to be part of that change in Africa? If Jessica is here. Yeah.
Yes,
great.
I'm here. Unfortunately, I can't turn on the video, but
That's fine.
To answer to that, I think as young leaders, first we must look into a way to the decision-making tables. And what I mean is being part of the parliament, being part of the policy creators, being part of the policy mobilizer in a formal way. There is power in being a young leader, but in a recognized form of authority that can initiate change. So what I think we can do, if we get that part, what we need to mobilize is a strategy from our government and private sector that involves technology advancements in every sector. And for that to happen, based on our own African knowledge, we need to have a budget setting that allocates more research and fundraisings in projects. And projects that bring solutions with the use of technology. In that way, we're going to have a significant change. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that concise answer. I want to acknowledge those who are also watching and participating from YouTube. Your presence is also felt, and you can also send your questions through there as well. We'll look at that and send it in if we have some time to spare. So let's quickly go to Isaac. A question came through saying that the African media is controlled by politicians and those in power to push for their political agendas. The authenticity and integrity of media is now in question. How do we deal with the disinformation, and how can we disarm politicians from controlling media for their own personal gain?
That's a very good question, and I think that's a question that it's not only African based; it's a global problem. And obviously, the counter to that has been independent media. See, the thing about the media and how powerful it is that, and especially now, is that, media is all about basically creating content, right? It's all about putting out information there. Previously, the barrier to putting information there was very difficult. So, but now it's no more difficult. Blogs, etc. Social media, you can start your own channel, etc. The way that we take power from political systems that encroach on our media freedoms or become the domain of media propaganda is that we create alternative forms. There's no way. There's no way by creating alternative forms, by creating our own media platforms, and by just telling the truth. The media is social media. The media is a viral tweet going on Twitter that says, for example, that this is what is happening. The media is when young people in Nigeria realize that when the police and the government in Nigeria was falling upon their rights with the NSAS, they created a viral media movement by putting their stories online, and that got the government to panic. That is what the media is. The media is no more BBC. The media is no more. The media is my podcast. The media is your social media channel. The problem, unfortunately, is that still, because of governmental jurisdictions, we still see the clamping down of governments on some of these platforms because government still can influence what happens on some of these platforms. And we know that. We know that from even the US and how Facebook and Cambridge Analytica influence the elections. But that is the reason why we should double down, because they can only do so much, right? At a point where this is what governments don't want. What governments don't want is at a point where everybody sees through their gimmick, right? Which is that if they succeed to mute a few people, it is easy for them to defend the narrative that those few people, those few voices were misnomers. But if it is a national uprising, and then they clamp down on it, then it is very obvious that there is an obvious tactic to actually clamp down on the voices of everybody. And that is the reason why the media should not be left to some organization anymore. We should speak up. The media is us, and so we should speak up. And when we do that collectively, our voices will be heard because we are the media. Thank you.
All right, so now the media and the power being in our hands, for a lot of us as African leaders, the work that we do means that we need to tackle issues that are happening here in Africa. And when we are talking about issues, most of these issues are negative. How can we, in promoting and changing and having the positive narrative, address these negative situations in a way that it doesn't negatively impact us as African, as a continent, a whole?
And that's a very, very good question, but also that's a dilemma, right? That as we promote what we think is going to give us an outlook globally, how do we challenge it, right? And I think that I might not have all of the answers, but I think that what we do is that we need to be able to contextualize our critique in a way that gives hope, right? So I think that's it. At the end of the day, we need to contextualize our critique in a way that gives hope, that says that these are systematic inadequacies. This is not the reality of us as our identity. I think that what is a recurring theme is almost that I cannot, for example, solve its own problems. And so when we can separate that, the question of this is Africa, or this is the identity of Africans as in we're always fighting, we're always being destroyed, etc., to this is a systematic problem that needs systematic issues, solutions to them, then we can start, dissociating what is a seeming representation of an identity of Africa to its problems. And we can do that when we talk about our issues without necessarily making that tied to what an African identity is. And that is where I think global media fails most of the time, which is that the insight that you get from most of the publication is that this is the state of Africa and it's unsalvageable. And that is unfortunate. And when we even are critiquing ourselves, we should give room for hope in those reportages that we do, because we know that this is our land, it can be salvaged. These systems are the systems that have enabled, incentivized some people to take advantage of us, but we can fix that. And I believe that leaving a space for hope allows us to be able to have that landing room. But it's a very difficult challenge, definitely.
Yeah, I totally get that. Thank you so much, Isaac. So, I mean, one thing that we take from this is that there's a technique we call framing in communication. So we need to frame our own stories. And even if we are tackling these negative issues, we should understand and have the right strategies in place in framing. This has been such an intense full session, and there's a lot for us all to take from this. I'm quite sure that the African leaders that are on the platform and are even going to watch afterwards will be taking home and working so hard in their areas in communication, collaboration, and partnership, and seeing that these are essential for us all to work together, because I mean, generations have come and have left, but one thing that we've been lacking as Africans is the ability to collaborate, because we are all very able, and if we are able to come together, there's a lot we can do. There's no limit to what we can achieve. Thank you so much for the amazing speakers that we've had here. Thank you all for joining here on Zoom, those joining on YouTube. Your participation, your contributions and questions were, highly appreciated and contributed a lot to this conversation. Thank you so much, all of you. So until the next session for this amazing initiative. And I also want to say a very big thank you to this the Youth Leadership Foundation. This is an amazing thing, guys. And this is something that Africa needs. And this is something that we are looking forward to impacting so many people in Africa. And thank you for setting up such an amazing initiative. And I know that this is just the beginning. Thank you all to the organizers, to the leadership, and everyone who has joined in. All right, so let's say we can bow out at this moment and see you all in the next session of this program. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, bye-bye. Bye-bye.